Hello and welcome to another episode of Stripping the Dipping. You're joined by usual dynamic duo of the MDM, the modern day Morgan Freeman, AMG Dent, and of course the very formidable F1 Black as well, to bring you some more amazing and interesting discussions, in the world of motorsport and Formula One. And how should I kick off this episode? Like quite a while ago, I had Nyasha from the Quick Stop podcast say, you know, like basically I've got one of the smoothest games in the game. So I was okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. Sounds fairly nice and that. And then he said, but wait, there was another individual with another exemplary voice that could absolutely melt butter. So, he's a very renowned name in the YouTube F1 content creators field. And he's my Lithuanian brother from another mother. It's the one, it's the only. We got Aldas in the building. Bro, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I mean, that intro. I mean, I'm trying to kind of like keep my feet on the ground right now, but I'm sky high after that intro. So, no, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And mate, I'm still brilliant. What an intro. I love that. Cheers.
Oh, no worries at all, man. We're always trying to, keep these intros going and we try and bring a new one every week. And with an amazing guest like yourself, man, just, it only feels right to do it. So I'm happy to hear you're all well. Black, you're inside here too. You're in the building. How are you doing today?
Yeah, hello. I feel like an inferiority complex when I'm the third best voice. Usually, I can compete, but no, Aldas, fantastic to have you with us. And maybe you'll need to give us some vocal coaching throughout the episode.
Oh, that's good. I mean, that's going to be tricky. It's one of those you either got it or you don't. I'm joking.
Well, on
Fantastic.
that note, then, let's get into the first topic, then, Aldous. So, actually, what people probably should know more about you is that you're actually quite a keen and passionate go-karter yourself. You, throughout your kind of like, like time in motorsports and following up as well, have competed, at some of the highest levels in go-karting. And it came up as a big surprise to all of us that you'll be taking part in, I believe, the BRKC, so the British Rental Car Championship this weekend. Could you just explain to our viewers at home just like how the opportunity came up? Because we're quite close with Brad Philpott, which is one of the co-founders of the event, and also just talk about your karting background too, because like I actually went out there last year, and it was just crazy, just the level of talent, just how dedicated everybody was, and just how technical karting is. People just see it as like a baby kind of Formula One car, or they tend not to kind of appreciate how nuanced it is and how physical karting can be as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of the way the BRKC started, and what's quite funny is that as we're recording, I'm going to go to practices for me tomorrow. So I'm leaving tomorrow for Milton Keynes for like 3 days. It's like a proper full-on event. There's people like coming from all over the world. But you talked about actually Nyasha in the intro. I met Brad at one of Nyasha's barbecues, and that was quite nuts. So that's why I met Brad, and that's where he told me about the karting thing. By the way, I hope Nyasha's invited you guys as well. We need to get that sorted as well. But so yeah, I met Brad at yeah again Nyasha's barbecue. Kind of told me about it a little bit then, and to be honest, at the time because this was August, so obviously we're in January now. I couldn't actually commit to it at the time because I didn't know what I was going to be doing in January, so I had to actually turn it down because I couldn't commit to it at that point. And it's super competitive. I think to be fair, most of the seats got sold out very, very quickly, but someone dropped out, and I was able to actually, yeah, basically Brad just came to me and said, would you still be up for it because someone's dropped out last minute? And I said, yeah, go for it. So yeah, it's going to be tough competition, but it's what racing's all about. Whether it's in Formula One or karting, most Formula One drivers, in fact, I think all of them pretty much on the grid now, they all started in karting, and it's just something. I don't know if you guys have done much karting, but there's just something so fun about it, especially just because it's so pure, and also quite chaotic as well. And I love endurance karting more than anything else. I've like sometimes I've karted. It's been like hour-long stints, like even hour 30 in the car the entire time racing, and it just honestly like it's an actual workout. Like people don't realize. I mean, karting itself is so physical. I don't even know what those Formula One drivers go through. Honestly, like it just. I think people don't understand even until they actually get into a race car or a car in terms of how physical motorsport can be. So it definitely is giving me just a new appreciation for the Formula One drivers. You see them like pumping in the gym and upload all the pictures on Instagram like pretty much everyone else and all their videos. But now I know why. So yeah, it's definitely giving me a new appreciation for sure.
Absolutely. You talked on a lot of key points there as well. Like the kind of pre-season element for Formula One drivers when it comes to staying sharp, and we see the likes of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz as well, like participating in a lot of go-karting as well, and even as well with just the BRKC as an event is so amazing. You'll have so much fun there, and one of the things that highlights for me was the element of having a surprise race. So for one of the heats that you will do, Aldas, is like basically a surprise track which no one's seen before, and even just having that kind of like surprise element into it as well creates this another kind of element which maybe we can see in Formula One. And you talked about kind of go-karting being the grassroots element of it, but then a lot of the fundamental stuff making it into the world of F1 as well.
Yeah, for sure, because you learn all of the basic. So think about all of the things that we see in terms of the wheel-to-wheel combat in Formula One. Whether it's a simple DRS pass, a switchback, a better exit on the corner, like all of that is still the same in karting, and it's kind of like I don't want to say it's like the same kind of level, because there's quite a lot more complexity in Formula One, and obviously the speed's a lot higher, and so the judgment has to be a lot better. You're obviously in cars, when you make a mistake, there's more room for error because you're going a bit slower. Like when you're at speed in a single seater, like that's a whole other level. But it's the same kind of things, the switchbacks, when you get better exit and you're able to overtake someone, or whether you can hold it around the outside. Just that feeling, honestly, like that, just to feel that is why I started karting, because as much as I love talking about racing, like there's nothing quite like doing it yourself. And maybe it's the same for if you're into football or something as well. Like even if you're a football YouTuber, most of them do like to play football from time to time, because you want to feel the sport. We talk about the athletes at the highest level, but yeah, when you feel it yourself, it's just a whole different level. So yeah, and I can't wait for this weekend with the BRKC. It's going to be super competitive. There is some drivers I learned, like it's not just like go-kart drivers. There's like single-seater GP like 2 drivers from like 10 years ago that are going to be taking part. So it's going to be unbelievable. But I can't wait to see kind of where I'm going to be, to be honest. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to that. You mentioned obviously there's going to be an alternative track that's going to surprise everyone, which actually should be in kind of my advantage, because I haven't had as much practice as some of the other guys on that track. So if it's a brand new track, hopefully that kind of might swing it more my way. So yeah, definitely can't wait for that as well.
Oh, it's going to be so exciting now. And like you mentioned as well, it's a great kind of opportunity. It's like really competitive and not something to be snubbed at. And as well as that, we'd like to just say, even from the early parts of this podcast, that we'll be rooting for you, that we implore everybody to go and check out, the British Rental Kart Championship YouTube channel as well, where we can follow your progress and all the other guys as well. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. But to segue into the next kind of topic, guys, and I'm going to bring Blag into this one too. From go-karting to the virtual world, last weekend around this time, a young Max Verstappen was, looking to secure his virtual esports campaign with Team Redline in the virtual Le Mans series. So just to kind of like explain in a nutshell what it is to those folks who aren't really so into the sim racing world alike, essentially this is a huge competition with loads of different companies coming together to sponsor it. Just to even enter this event, entries can range from anywhere from £2,000 just to take part in the virtual Le Mans. It sees the likes of Max Verstappen, Felipe Drogovic, lots of GT3, GTE, LMP drivers, and esports drivers training at least 5 hours a day, for the greatest spectacle that was supposed to be this 24-hour race at Le Mans, a virtual one. But, the limitations where you can compare the virtual world with, the real life world, or even a go-karting circuit, is that at times when you're racing online, you can have disconnections from the server, you can have technical difficulties, and that can be quite frustrating when there's a prize fund of a whopping €250,000 at stake. So Max Verstappen was leading the virtual Le Mans series, and then through no fault of his own, just to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt, the servers were allegedly DDoSed, which is a technical way of saying hacked. And unfortunately, the rules by the organizers were that if you dropped out of this virtual server and you tried to reconnect, then you would have to basically drop a lap behind the field, which at Le Mans, through my own experiences last year, is like hell. You just sit there and you literally watch time evaporate before your own eyes. So for Max to lead that race and then for it to be taken away from him, I feel was quite sad. And he was very public in his criticisms of Motorsport Games, which are the co-developer of R Factor, the sim platform, and the FIA, who also organized the event too. And this got me thinking. I'm going to bring Blag into this to kick the ball rolling. Shout out to Alex Van Gien, which said this. Max got really peep with not being able to compete in a series he's been preparing for months and calling the series a joke, which I totally agree with him on. But, and this is the kind of the kind of tasty bit, it's absolutely fine for him to be cool with the rules being made up on the fly that helped him to win the championship. So clearly this is a dig at Abu Dhabi 21, and in a way I can kind of see that view as well. Like if the rules suited him in one scenario, but then on this occasion in a virtual context, it didn't. How comes he wasn't able to appreciate the point in the real life thing? So Blag, I'll let you kind of run with this one.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm really intrigued to hear, Aldas, what you think. But before we jump to you, my sense is that Max is kind of the epitome of no filter. So I just think he says what he's thinking, and he felt frustrated. And it's won him 1 or 2 world championships, depending on how you count it. So he's clearly a very talented guy and doesn't need, I guess, to be, what would you call it, PC or PR trained. So I think what you saw there was like Max saying exactly how he felt in the moment. If you were a bit more corporate, you might think, the world champion of Formula One criticizing sim racing or a particular sim racing organization. Maybe that has a lot of weight and I should perhaps not do that. But, it's how he felt. And that's what he said. Aldas, what do you think? What did you make of the rant or the remarks of Max?
I mean, first of all, I think you absolutely nailed it. Like Blag definitely said, nailed it in terms of like Max says what he wants, and he's always done that. Even in Formula One, again, maybe he's not as filtered. Like I guarantee George Russell, PR 63, like he ain't saying that. That's for sure. Like he's a bit more. He's got that PR filter. But I think with Max, in a way, he's always been like that. He always speaks his mind, whether it's good or bad, and in a weird way, I think ultimately it's actually quite good because at least he's not faking it. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's a tricky one, especially when it comes to like that Le Mans virtual series. Like the amount that people put in it. Like I know some of the people that actually are raced in it, and I couldn't imagine like. I think reliability, let's say in motorsport, is one thing. Like even I've had not me personally, but like I've had teammates who like mid-race have had like reliability problems. Actually, no, to be fair, I've had a few like tire failures and stuff. We had to like box and just that feeling of something that isn't even in your hands, going wrong and like against you is so horrible. Like it's really tough. But servers being hacked is something completely different. That is it's a tricky one because R Factor 2, which is the game that I think they use, it's the only one that has the license to run Le Mans 24 hours. So it's not even like you can, choose a different game to even run it. As far as I understand, like they have the license. Motorsport, I forget what the company's called, but the R Factor 2 game has the license, so they have to run it. So ultimately, it's on the developers to do a better job next time. But when you're talking about this, isn't like an F1 open lobby. Like this is unreal. Like the level of competition here. We're talking about professional esports drivers, like the Formula One, like 2-time world champion, or one time, I suppose, depending on which side you fall on that. But the Formula One world champion, regardless, that's a big look like for the company, for the game, and the rant that he went on. We know Max can go on those rants, but man, that hits big. Like again, that's a Formula One world champion. That says basically, I think he said, I'm uninstalling the game because of this. So yeah, what happens again? I don't actually do like too much sim racing, to be honest. Like again, the real life for me is where it's at, but I can imagine the frustration of the people. It's for everyone, like the frustration of the drivers, the frustration of the fans as well. Like even I know some of the commentators that were there, they had to feel like dead air for like 2-3 hours. Like that is not easy. So even fair play to them, but ultimately the people behind the game need to do a better job of making sure the hacks don't happen, because that's supposed to be the Le Mans 24 hour, the esports version of it. That's supposed to be the pinnacle of like esports endurance racing. And yeah, I understand Max's frustration. Did he kind of say it, did he convey it in the best way? Maybe not. I mean, I certainly wouldn't have went on that kind of rant, but listen, it's Max Verstappen. He says what he says what he says, and he doesn't really have a filter. So and whether you love it or you hate it, you kind of have to accept that that's Max.
True, and I think we articulated it all in each angle, in terms of it had to be of all people, Max, that would come out and have an outburst like that. But at the same time as well, I think that there is room for improvement within the sim racing space. And, things like this, they don't necessarily put sim racing in a good light. Neither does it, with motorsport games that have that exclusive license, because there are other sim racing platforms such as iRacing that, would love a license for the 24 hours Le Mans. And unfortunately, because motorsports have that license exclusively, it means that, other brands like iRacing have to kind of repackage it or rebrand it as something else. And it doesn't have that kind of feel, the graphics, the UI that, the licensed 24 hours does. So really interesting thing to come out of it. And, I think it left a lot of opinion online. So move on to the next set of topics from the week, guys. And I'll list these out because we are quite, precious on time today. There's 3 other things that happened throughout the week. And that was we finally had confirmation from the FIA that there will be 23 races for next season or the upcoming season. A bit of kind of a tiki-taka there with, it being announced, and a bit of frustration as well, since China was to be agreed. Unfortunately, with the kind of after effects of COVID in China, they weren't able to reach an agreement with that. And even still, a big shout out to one of our guests, Jonathan Tranter. He was talking about, the FIA kind of like dropping the ball of such, and maybe them trying to advance more their talks in relation to Kyalami, or using some other pre-existing tracks that we've been to before, such as Istanbul. We also had a very shocking news when Lewis Hamilton dropped what we call what do they call them again, Georgina? Oh, I forget. The good old what do you call them?
Tail strap.
Yes, there we go.
Yes.
See, Georgina's
There we
in with
go,
the kids. The good old thirst trap. Because as Sir Lewis Hamilton dropped his tasty content on Instagram, James Vowles was the breaking news story going over to Williams. So that's also something we need to discuss as well. And then on the topic of the GOAT himself, Sir Lewis has kind of been at the heart of a lot of back and forth on F1 Twitter, as well as Mercedes are edging closer to finalizing, hopefully, an extended contract for Lewis Hamilton, potentially what could be a $65 million deal, with him staying on to be a Mercedes ambassador. This story is broken to us by F1 Planet. But I just wanted to give you guys both the floor, Blag and Aldas. What's your take on the 23 race calendar? James Vowles going over to Williams after so many years at Mercedes, and on top of this as well, this kind of salary cap kind of discussion online.
Aldas, why don't you enlighten us first, and I'll chip in after.
Yeah, no problem. So in terms of the calendar, I'm actually okay with a 23 race calendar, to be honest. To be honest, I'd actually prefer it to be 20 races. I think that's like a really nice medium. Even last year, I don't know about you guys, but last year it did feel like it was just maybe a race or two too much. But with China not being replaced, we have a pretty chunky gap. Like, I think it's 3 weeks or something, because we finish the Australian Grand Prix is on the 2nd of April, and then we have to wait until the 30th of April. So, literally 3 weeks until the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So that is a pretty chunky gap. Now, unfortunately, it kind of came down to money in the end, because I think Portimao in Portugal, which is a track I actually quite like, I thought was pretty decent in 2020 and 2021 as well. Although they did have a good, they did want to, obviously they wanted to pay Formula One to have the race. Ultimately, it wasn't as much as China was paying, and basically because China kind of cancelled their race, it means that the money that China was paying would still go to Formula One, and ultimately Portimao just couldn't match what China was paying, so that's why they instead, didn't go with it, which I think is a big disappointment. But it is what it is. But yeah, I think in terms of the calendar, I'm actually quite happy with it. Again, that kind of chunky gap is going to be a bit strange. It's going to be like a mid-season break after 3 races, which is going to be interesting. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But actually, really quick on the Lewis thirst traps. He just delivers, doesn't he? That guy is just unreal. And I love the way Mercedes are also now like retweeting them on Twitter as well. Big up to the Mercedes admin. They know what they're doing. But yeah, the James Vowles thing is actually, I think, quite cool, because certainly from what I was seeing on Twitter, I think some Mercedes fans were quite happy to see James Vowles go a little bit off. I think they were happy for him to get that promotion to go from head of strategy to, a team principal role, which is a massive step up. But yeah, I think after some of the Mercedes strategies, I think coming even off the back of 2021, they were quite happy to, perhaps a little shake up for this year. But yeah, I think I think it's a good hire for Williams because there wasn't really that much. I don't think there was actually that much in the field in terms of people available, like with experience that can get a team, back to at least the midfield. Because Williams have a long way to go. Like this is a long term project, and realistically, they need a team principal who's gonna at least keep them afloat until 2026. Like the next kind of big regulation cycle is when I think it will be their first kind of chance. So, and when you also look at the car as well, the lack of sponsors, I think there's a big job over there now. I think James Vowles, I don't think he's going to underestimate the challenge. I think it also works out a little bit for Mercedes as well, because in a weird way, I think that even though James Vowles, like, he underlined the fact that this has nothing to do with Mercedes, that relationship is gone. We're now, competitors, like that's it. I still think having those Mercedes links and Toto and James Vowles being, really close, I think politically that could be really good for Mercedes. I think that's just kind of like another vote in their corner, because if you remember a few years ago, going into 2022, there was a fight for that seat between Mercedes and Red Bull, whether they could either put Nick de Vries or Alex Albon into that Williams to replace George Russell. And in the end, it was Red Bull that came out on top. So, because Alex Albon got the seat over Nick de Vries. So perhaps it's a little bit more power back to Toto. So, and Mercedes, I'm sure he's going to like that. But yeah, there's not too much judgment in terms of James Vowles at the moment. I think we have to give him time. We have to at least give him the season and, a couple of seasons to see what leader he's going to be, because I want to see Williams back, but there's a long way to go.
Fascinating views on the link between, or not link between, Williams and Mercedes, and it will remain to be seen. But I, for one, look forward to seeing a race on the hard tyre, as seemed to be the go-to strategy for Vowles. So let's see. On the race calendar, I was looking at it, and it's actually because of the Chinese cancellation, it's actually a 4-week gap, and that's actually just as long as the summer break. So it will feel like we have a spring break and a summer break. And the thing I noticed, because I've actually been to the Belgian Grand Prix, one of the few ones I've been to, the Belgian Grand Prix this year is going to be in July, before the summer break. And usually what happens is it's actually the other end in sort of late August. So maybe it won't be as wet, but it does show that they're kind of contorting the classic calendar. And I think part of that is to fit in Las Vegas, which is in the second half of the season and wasn't there this year. So it will certainly be an interesting sort of structure to the season. The story that we didn't cover just then, and Aldas, keen to get your view as well. There's been a kind of mixed reaction, I think, to the contract negotiations for Lewis Hamilton. Like, clearly, a lot of this could just be hearsay, or all is hearsay. It could just be made up. But I personally think, Lewis Hamilton at £65 million a year, if you compare it to the rest of the grid, like, he's an exceptional talent. There's a limit on careers. Clearly it's an obscene amount of money if you think about egalitarian society, but based on supply and demand, I don't think that's unreasonable. But Aldas, how does $65 million dollars actually sit with you as a figure?
Well, in the context of Lewis Hamilton, it needs to be more. That's what I think. But listen, when you're talking about it, of course it's a lot of money, but I look at Lewis as I compare him as a bit of a different case to every single other driver, because at least 70% of these drivers, like, they grew up massively privileged with a huge amount of money. So of course, of course they made it at the top level of sport, but they were massively advantaged. They had a massive advantage in the first place, and then came from a huge amount of privilege. Like, Lewis Hamilton, he's someone who, in my opinion, he bucks the trend. He's one of the very few drivers, I think. I'm trying to actually honestly think of the top of my head, like, out of the non-millionaire parents, like, I think Fernando Alonso also came from kind of a more middle-class background. I think some of the older drivers, certainly. I remember Seb was another one. Obviously, he's gone now, but that kind of group of Seb, Lewis, and Fernando, like, they didn't come from like the same. They didn't come from a racing background, or their dad wasn't a millionaire or billionaire. So whenever Lewis is always going to get criticized, doesn't matter what he does. What he does, even if he doesn't do anything, by the way. But yeah, listen, mate, that guy needs to get his money any way he can, and either way, after what he's won and what he's done for the sport and where he's come from, more importantly, I am never going to be one of those people that's going to kind of like criticize him for wanting even more money. And ultimately, it's Mercedes' choice. Like, if they have the money, then they're going to pay, and ultimately, you're worth what someone's going to pay you. So yeah, I'm, unlike most of the F1 community, I actually get happy when I see someone like a Lewis Hamilton, ask for even more and get even more money. Like, that doesn't kind of really make me argue or get me stressed. I think that's really good for looking at where Lewis came from. So yeah, get your money, Lewis. That's what's important. And if Mercedes have it, then go for it.
Yeah, and I suspect some of it will, well, a decent proportion will go into his sort of Mission 44 and the Axis project and so on. So we'll see about that. Dens, before we move on and learn about Aldas's origin story, because I have some questions. What do you think about these new stories, the calendar, Val's, and Lewis's deal? Any spicy views?
Yeah, thank you, Blag. And yeah, it's an interesting one because, you know, in relation to the calendar, I think like Aldas mentioned as well, 23 races, that in itself could seem like a push, especially, you know, if you're like a more kind of like vintage F1 fan, you've been following it from the 2000s or the 90s. You know, we used to probably get like 16 rounds or 18 rounds. So to be pushing 23, it's quite a lot. And in a season where you have like a runaway kind of contender like Max wrap it up 5 races before the end of the season, kind of makes everything else feel like a bit of an exhibition. But you know, I was wishing that the FIA could be a bit more purposeful in their way of like planning, because of course the China thing fell through. But then like our good like fan and also kind of a follower of the show, Jonathan mentioned, we haven't heard too much in the way of Kyalami and the progression of that to see whether or not that will be on the grid. So hopefully the FIA don't completely drop the ball with that, you know, as the Vegas lights shine bright in their eyes. And then in relation to James Vowles, Valtteri is James, like Aldas mentioned too. Like it feels good to see him make that natural progression. Whether it's the right one, I have no idea, because of course Paddy Lowe had a quite senior role at Mercedes quite some years ago, and then when he moved to Williams on the kind of the end of the Claire Williams phase, didn't necessarily work out for good old Paddy. But again, under the new investment at Williams from Dalton Capital, it'll be interesting to see how James leads that team as a principal. And yeah, it'll be also interesting to see what effect that has on Mercedes, because now they might actually delegate his responsibilities amongst multiple people, or there's word on the curb that there might be a female like race engineer that will take his role, which we love to see, you know, because we're all about diversity. We've seen Hannah Smith at Red Bull lead Max to a lot of wins through strategic and tactical masterclasses. So it feels like a new dawn, not just for Williams but Mercedes too. So that's interesting. And the last thing on the deal, I think both of you guys summed it up perfectly. You know, Lewis is not just a driver. Lewis is a franchise. He's a brand. He, you know, arguably is Formula One. You know, for the things he's done for the sport in terms of bringing it to a new demographic, the messages and kind of causes he stands for, in terms of like, you know, his star-like qualities, if it's fashion, if it's, you know, IWC and doing some stunts with Tom Cruise in the middle of the air, or even just kind of the little kind of things he did recently, I think at the Vegas Expo, when he was like driving around in the W11 or 10 show car and doing some donuts for everybody. So nice to know that Lewis is going to hopefully be around, fingers crossed, for a couple more years. And yeah, I think it goes both ways, you know, each hand has to scratch each other. Lewis brings that commercial element and also the technical experience as well of a seasoned veteran. But then also, you know, it's nice to see Mercedes keep him in the family too, because most drivers move on and they look for that big move to Ferrari, or, you know, they might try and hunt around and sniff for a drive at Red Bull. But Lewis has said from day one he's been a Mercedes driver since the Ron Dennis era, and it looks like he's going to be there even after he's retired and still doing things for the kids and stuff like that too. So really happy just to see that come along. Obviously, you'll get the people that will say the contrary, but everyone has an opinion. So as long as everyone stays respectful, that's the main thing. But I'll hand back to you, Blag, because I know we want to dive in a bit more into Aldas is like, you know, this is the early kind of memories and just, you know, the journey of being a YouTuber as well.
Yeah, this is the moment where people that were around in the 90s like me will remember the big red book. There was a show called This Is Your Life. We'll do our best, Aldas, not to embarrass you. But in the last like 20 minutes of the episode, we've just been sort of sitting back and shooting the breeze. But we've actually like not really showcased, other than Denz's fantastic intro, that we're among sort of F1 YouTube royalty. You know, you're an account, or you're a YouTuber that, you know, whether I did this podcast or not, I've heard of you, and I've watched your videos for a good few years. When did you, I guess there's a question, like, when did you realize that you were going to be a YouTuber? Like, you must have done videos and thought, I'm just doing videos. Like, how soon did you think, yeah, this is me, that's what I'm going to do?
I mean, to be fair, it all kind of started just making videos for fun. I mean, I didn't really know like too many people that, like, I'm talking in real life. I didn't know too many people that were kind of F1 fans that, you know, none of my friends really were. So I thought, well, who do I go to talk about F1? Because when you're into something, when you're passionate about a sport, you want to, you know, you want to talk to other fans about it. And so I thought the internet, you know, I'm sure there's Formula One fans on the internet. So that's how it all started, to be honest, just making maybe like a video or two a month, like whilst I had a bit of time. And then all of a sudden it kind of, yeah, it kind of kicked off. You know, people were coming back and actually watching my videos, and the numbers were going crazy. And I mean, even, you know, even to this day, sometimes I actually get recognized just off YouTube, and it's just such a strange and humbling experience when someone says, "Oh, you know, you really got me into Formula One. I really like your content." Like, it's not, I don't want to say that's what it's all about, but just hearing an actual person say that, you know, they watch your content, they support what you do, it's just absolutely nuts. Like, it's difficult to describe, but I mean, yeah, it's a really good feeling. So I mean, and that's what it's all about. It's about making great content, enjoying the sport. And I suppose the moment I realized that I was a proper YouTuber is when I decided to do it full time. You know, after I finished uni, I thought I'll take the plunge and try it for a year. And yeah, I never looked back. And I suppose, yeah, that's the point where I was probably like, yeah, now I'm a YouTuber. But it's still a bit of a weird thing to say to people that maybe don't know, even just the content space, you know, that maybe don't make videos or don't know too much about it. They're still just like, well, what does that actually mean, by the way? And so yeah, it's a fun one, but it's unreal, and I'm constantly reminded how lucky I am in terms of like making videos and actually having a living, talking about the sport that I love, and again, you know, doing stuff with fans, obviously doing stuff with other content creators like yourself. It's just it's really cool. It's really, really cool.
Well, look, we appreciate you doing us the honors and joining us. You talked about how it all began. What's your first sort of F1 or motorsport memory? Like, what's the first thing you remember seeing?
I mean, it's got to be, for me, it all goes back to an episode of Top Gear, actually, where Richard was driving Fernando Alonso's, like, I think it was 2005, championship winning Renault, the R25. And I think that's the first time I ever actually saw a Formula One car. And like, that's actually also my favorite livery of all time. That kind of mild seven, that electric blue, the yellow. Well, I even have a jacket to match it. I'm such a big fan of that livery, and I think it all goes back to there. I think that's why. I think in a weird way, that's also why I'm a bit of a Fernando Alonso fan as well. Like, it all goes back to that first kind of memory of a Formula One car in general. So yeah, that's where it kind of all started, and then I think my passion for Formula One came from also my passion of from cars. I'm definitely massively into my cars as well, and so all of a sudden that kind of created that motorsport kind of itch, and then I started watching Formula One full time in 2012, and I haven't missed a race or a season since. So yeah, you just get hooked. You just get hooked on sport, and you can't kind of get away from it. And motorsport and cars in general, you know, that's what I'm all about. So yeah, that's kind of where it all came from.
That first memory is often really powerful because actually the first video of yours that I really saw, and I looked on YouTube today to see how long ago it was. It's like 4 years ago this video came out, was the downfall of Williams. And I think you did it in 3 parts. But my first memory of Formula One is Williams, like seeing them dominant. I think I remember vaguely that sort of 1993, you know, similar blue and yellow, but not electric blue, like a Canon car. And then the Rothmans, definitely. So yeah, that first memory really stands out. I mean, in our script here, it says you've amassed over 32 million views. I just went to check just in case it had changed. It's actually 35. So like, it's incredible. And that's I think in 4 years or so. Do you have a video that really stands out to you that you've made that you feel most proud of?
I actually get asked this question quite a lot sometimes. And to be fair, I usually give like a different answer to that question. It's actually, to be fair, it's the same when someone asks, you know, what's your favorite movie? Like, it literally depends on the day. Like, it could change from day to day. But there's actually one video, and it's actually it is one of my, like, I don't think it's the best video I ever made, but I think it was a really big stepping stone for my channel. And it was a video I did about Lewis Hamilton called I'm looking at it now, actually, the story of the greatest rookie season in Formula One. And I put that video out. I'm just going to look now through, what was it? Yeah, on the 2nd of April, 2020. And the reason why that video stands out is because before then, I would say that that's actually where you said you asked me earlier, like, when did I consider myself a YouTuber? Like, that's when it was, because before that video, I was only making videos for fun, really. Like, whilst I had time, whilst I was still doing uni. But once I graduated in mid 2020, that's when I started taking YouTube. That's when I was doing it full time. And that video was the first one. I remember it took me like a whole day, like, to edit. Like, literally wake up at 9 and I finished that video at like 10 or 11 at the end of the day. Like, it was a long video to edit. And even though it's definitely not my best video, I've learned a lot since then. But that was the first one where I thought, this is the content I want to be making. These are the sort of stories. And this is the style that I want to edit as well. I want to try and include pictures and footage, if I can, of, Formula One and kind of informative videos telling stories. So I think that's why that video kind of stands out to me more than any other.
Amazing. And like, I was looking at that video ahead of this episode, and when you said it took me a whole day to make, I was like, what, only a day? Like, it looks like it takes a week to make something that intricate.
To be fair, that's just the editing. That's just the editing part. That doesn't involve like the writing. Like, in terms of writing a 21-minute script, because obviously, I'm telling a story, so the videos are scripted. Like, that was just the editing. So yeah, it took it was like 2 or 3 days easy to write that video. Then it also, took quite a bit of time to make the thumbnail as well, because I was trying a different style as well. I never actually tried a thumbnail style like that before. And then also the actual recording of my voice, like, I was just talking about the editing, to be fair, and then the actual entire editing I just did straight over the course of like a day. So yeah, it was a much longer process than that, but yeah.
It's a great video. I'd encourage people to go and watch it, and also your like latest stuff about like who's the most under pressure. Like, my question to you about sort of during the season, clearly, 23 races a season, there's a rhythm. You're going to have to respond to the races or predict the races and so on. But then equally in the sort of off season, you've got to come up with content that's innovative and original and eye-catching. So what do you find most difficult, the kind of in-season rhythm or the out-of-season kind of creativity?
Definitely the out-of-season creativity. And I mean, I'm finding it hard even now, just because I can't wait for the season to begin, because it's so much easier. Obviously in the off-season, there's also, to be fair, people and Formula One fans, like, they do also want a bit of time off. But like, when it comes to YouTube, you can't really, take too many breaks. So you've got to keep going. So I just can't wait for the season to kind of come back. And, even pre-season testing, like, there's always something to talk about in pre-season testing. So yeah, it's definitely more difficult in the off season to find, like, kind of those, again, like you said, those unique kind of video ideas. But yeah, it gets a lot more easier to kind of find things to talk about when the season begins, and especially when you have a title battle. I mean, in 2021, I mean, even now, Max versus Lewis, like, that's just box office content right there that everyone still talks about. So yeah, it's definitely a lot better when the season comes back. And I'm one of those people where, like, after Abu Dhabi ends, I'm like, 1 week I'm like, oh cool, Formula One's away, and then I'm like, I want Bahrain like now. So yeah, I can't wait for everyone to come back.
Brilliant. And before I hand to Dens, and I can really hear the energy sort of pulsing out of like your creativity and the season, waiting for it to come back. Before I hand to Dens, who's got also a question on YouTube, I'm like always trying to steal people's intellectual property. Don't worry, I'm not going to copy your logo or anything. But like, if there is a secret to a successful YouTube video or a successful YouTube channel, please bear all. Tell us, what is that one secret that you would say?
I would say 70, and actually, to be fair, right at the beginning of the video, you asked me, like, for a bit of like advice in terms of like voice, how to have a good voice. Honestly, one of the biggest advice I can give, 60 to 70% of a video is good audio. Like, that's something I learned, actually, just getting, not even it doesn't have to be an expensive mic, but a lot of content creators, ask me, obviously message me, ask me for help and stuff. And I'd say good audio is like 60 to 70% of a video, and then the visuals will come after that. You kind of develop, obviously some people have like, it's just a podcast style. So, more like this, or some people do shorter content and, they kind of want to perhaps include a few images or videos, and you can find all of that. But getting like good audio is honestly like my number one advice that I'd give, to anyone starting, really.
Boom. Okay, now the whole market's going to be saturated with people with amazing audio. Thanks. You should have. I should have asked you this in the green room, right? So we could have got the secret. But there we are.
Yeah. Just turn up the bass, and then everyone's got a buttery voice.
Exactly. Dens, over to you. I think you have a question about one of the videos.
I love that, Blag. And also, Aldas, I'm gonna join into the loathing of this your content as well, bro, because I've watched it for many years as well, and I've been a huge fan. And one question I wanted to ask you, one of my favorite ones there is the Ferrari F 2012 the worst car to ever challenge? And it got me thinking, like, what other disastrous monstrosities of a race car has there ever been in Formula One history that could easily deny a great racing driver of challenging for a championship? And then it got me thinking about the silver thing. I think they refer to it as a W13 or the worst 13 or something like
The
that. There,
wheelbarrow
Aldas.
13.
Yeah, but I like that one. I like that one. We might have to patent that afterwards. But Aldas, question was really is what car would you say was actually worse than Fernando Alonso's Ferrari from 2012 or Lewis Hamilton and George Russell's W13 from the most recent 2022 season? And how would you compare and contrast the two cars and the challenges that both drivers faced, during those seasons?
I think they're both. I mean, first of all, the Ferrari was definitely a better car than the Mercedes, because that's why, as bad as it was, Fernando Alonso was still able to challenge for a title with it. But it's very, I think, not just kind of leaving the cars for a second, the circumstances of those two seasons was very different. Like in 2012, we had multiple teams. What was it? 7 different winners in the first 7 races. Whilst when you look at, this season, in the first kind of third, it was only really Ferrari and Red Bull. Like that was it. So that brought the game a little bit closer towards Fernando Alonso in terms of like, it wasn't just say Sebastian Vettel winning every single race, or even just Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton who was at McLaren at the time. It wasn't just those two winning every single race. It was the points were spread out a little bit more evenly. So I think that brought the level a lot closer to Fernando Alonso, which is why he was able to challenge for the title. And the Ferrari, the thing about the Ferrari is that the Ferrari of 2012, I do, in terms of, I mean, I haven't watched every single season of Formula One, obviously. Like, that was the first season I actually started watching. And for me, so far, it's still the best car to ever challenge for a title. And when I say challenge, like, I mean, Fernando Alonso took it to a title decider. I think that's a car that won 2 races. I think it won 2 races that season, or 3 or something. So, yeah, something crazy like that. And yeah, 3, I think it was 3 Grand Prix that it won, which is just, yeah, nuts for it to go into a title decider. But there was a lot more circumstances that kind of helped Fernando, and why that car it made that car a title challenging car in terms like the points were spread a lot more evenly. It was also a very, very reliable car. So just like the Mercedes, actually, one of the reasons why, for example, in 2022, why there was almost, we were thinking like, is Mercedes, is Lewis and George going to beat Ferrari in the constructors? Like, one of the reasons for that is because the Mercedes was unbelievably reliable. Like, Ferrari were kind of blowing up and on fire half the time, looking at Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. And it was almost the opposite in 2012, where one of the things that Fernando had to his advantage was that the Ferrari, although it wasn't a great car, it was very reliable, and he was always picking up either the podiums or the points, whilst the Red Bull, and especially the McLaren, I mean, reliability arguably cost Lewis a chance at the 2012 title as well. So that's something that the Ferrari also had as an advantage. And so that kind of the points being spread more evenly, the reliability, being a lot better on the Ferrari. And also the car did get a little bit better over the course of the season. It wasn't, by no means the worst car in Formula One. I don't want to also kind of over-egg that the 2012 was like the worst car of all time. But when you look at what Felipe Massa was doing in it and what Fernando Alonso was doing it, it's like, are they driving the same car? So yeah, the Ferrari is really a better car, and that's why Fernando was able to challenge for the title. But also keep in mind, in 2022, we had a brand new regulation period. Like the first third of the season was just kind of a learning period for all of the teams. So yeah, there's a lot of different kind of differences between the cars.
Absolutely, and I agree and like echo your sentiments as well in comparison and contrasting the differences, but also in a way there's the mentality aspect in terms of the similarities as well of trying to at least extract the performance. And the Mercedes have always had that kind of reliability edge, but then with Ferrari, it's just that passion and that kind of desire to win. And we hope that obviously this season things are going to be a lot more closer. Obviously, Frederick Vasseur has replaced Binotto as well, which was quite a shock to a lot of us too. And in other news as well, Aldo, so I get your view on this as well. a young Nick DeFries was at the center of some controversy earlier today too, as a story broke from Formula Racers and Simon Dow as well, so shout out to them, that essentially Nick DeFries may have taken out a loan to fund out reaching his chances into F1, which is not unfamiliar for a lot of us that, come from a normal background and have some way to do it. And essentially in this agreement reached with the backer, it said if he was successful, then he would make some sort of agreement to pay back some of his earnings to the lender, which would roll over to the 23 season. So it's come to light that there could potentially be a Dutch millionaire that's looking to sue the young 27-year-old for the breach of the agreement. What's your take on this in terms of whether or not you think Nick owes the lender anything, from a moral standpoint, and also as well, is that good publicity for the young AlphaTauri driver, or is that something that could potentially hamper him going into next season if it's an issue of funding and lawsuits as well?
I mean, it's such a tricky one. He took this loan out back in 2018. He was in he was in Formula 2 at that point. And it's weird because, when we talk about contracts and stuff, it's all pretty boring stuff. And, in terms of what I've read really quickly, technically, the deal was that he should have made it into Formula 1 by 2022. And that's when he should have started maybe paying it off. But ultimately, he's made it a year too late. So it's kind of it's one of those, if it says in your contract you have to pay it off by, or, part of the contract is that you have to get to Formula 1 by 2022 and you make it a year later. It's such a contracts are contracts. Ultimately, he is a breach if that's what, they are. But that's why contracts are just such a boring thing. But I think it just highlights that's what it takes to get into Formula 1. You've got to take a loan of 250,000 euros back in 2018. And keep in mind, he was still part of the McLaren program at that point, I think. So there was still a bit of McLaren backing for him, but it wasn't enough at the time. So he needed even more money to continue in Formula 2. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Hopefully now, because he is part of the Red Bull family and kind of maybe they can help, settle it. Because obviously you don't want it to go to court, but hopefully they can settle it with whoever, provided the loan. So, yeah, it's going to be, I don't think it's going to actually affect the Vries, as long as he performs now in Formula 1, he should start now making a salary to where hopefully, kind of offsets that and he can kind of sort his financial issues out. Or maybe Red Bull can kind of back him a little bit and help him out. But yeah, it's one of those contract things, isn't it? It's also one of those if you're associated with a Formula 1 driver, even if he is a breach of contract, he's just made it into Formula 1, yes, a year later in the contract, but surely you can come to some kind of maybe understanding that doesn't involve, bad headlines or, but of course they want their money and they want their compensation. So it's going to be, it's a bit of a weird story, actually. No, I don't think anyone saw this one coming, but yeah, we're going to have to wait and see. It's a weird one. If the lender, potentially, maybe even even though he's broken a contract, potentially say that, could you at least, potentially have us on your helmet or something as a compensation. So, you can sponsor, you can kind of promote our company. We're the ones that helped you get into Formula 1, or just kind of make a deal instead of just go straight to suing him. So, yeah, we'll see how all of this goes. But when it comes to the legal stuff like this, it's not quite as exciting as On Track, is it?
Absolutely, we've seen, probably not in the same vein, but a lot of kind of legal contract stuff coming in the last couple of years. I think the most infamous one for me has to be Rich Energy and obviously Haas through that kind of memed season of Gunter telling people not to slam his door. But that's a story for another day. And Black, I wanted to bring you into this as well. What's your thoughts, potentially Nick and this legal situation that's ensuing? Is there any kind of help for him, or do you think it will be settled quite quickly?
Yeah, it just seemed like something where, you threaten court action, you even go through the motions, but ultimately it's cheaper for all concerned not to line the pockets of lawyers. So given we don't know exactly what's in the contract, we don't know who's in the right, who's in the wrong. But one thing it does say, we've had a great number of really fantastic talents that are coming through the junior formula. We had Colin Queen towards the end of last season. He was up at the front in British Formula Ford last year. He's going to be in GB4. We've had Taylor Ferns, who's in the USAC Silver Crown, and Sabra Cook, another female racer who was in W Series, and of course Miles Rowe, the first black driver to win an IndyCar sanctioned event. Look, the thing that all these guys had in common was that they were talking to us about the challenges of getting sponsorship. You know, money talks. And Aldas was saying earlier, like, for some of these drivers to make it not coming from a rich background is a huge achievement. You know, like you talked about Alonso, Vettel, Hamilton. I think Ocon is of a similar sort of background. Like, these guys weren't made of money. So like, it just says, like, whoever's right or wrong, I think there's something wrong with the pyramid system in that how much it costs. And look, it's a competitive business. So can you make it cheaper? I really don't know. I really wish we could. And then we might solve some of the other problems around diversity in the sport. But yeah, I don't know what you think, Dans, if that chimes with you.
I think both of what you guys said resonates with me in relation to him, and it highlights that even at this kind of stage, Formula One is a sport that's over 70 years old, and now even still, there's issues with people getting in. And with Nick, you just have to imagine that he just got in by the skin of his chinny chin chin. That rhymes because like, it essentially took Alex Albon getting appendicitis for him to even get a look or an opportunity, a sniff, at showing what he was capable of doing on that day where he absolutely outclassified Curry Goat Tiffy and that. And even then, like, he still got the ghost of the past haunting him in terms of funding and trying to get all of these legal ramifications that would have put him in a position to get a seat on the grid. So if it's been like that for him, you can only imagine what it's like for the other younger cats on the grid trying to kind of make their way up to the pinnacle of motorsport. So great points raised by both of you. I'm going to segue the question off then from the news and go back to Aldas and his great content creator background. Because Aldas, I'm going to give you a hypothetical scenario, bro. The big CEO of Netflix, he's rolling up to your house, bro. He's rolling up in a black S-Class, all black tough, German whip and that. He's coming with a big Gucci duffel bag for you. And it's got loads of money inside there. And he turns around, he says, Aldas, my Lithuanian brother from another mother, I need you to direct a new Netflix documentary about any rivalry in F1 of your choice. And you, my guy, my star, you have to direct this series or documentary, and you have to be the creative guy behind it. You have to pick the storyline. Who would you go for in terms of a Netflix documentary about a rivalry in F1?
Does this have to be on the current grid or just whenever in Formula One throughout the history of F1?
We're gonna give you the full kind of like scope to pick who you want, because this the CEO of Netflix, he's looking at you, Alda. He's been looking at the numbers. He knows that this content you're gonna make is gonna bang. So he's super excited and just saying, money is no object. Deliver me a master. Give me a Aldas masterpiece. Give me something that it's gonna be the folklore of, like, basically film and culture in the motorsport realms in decades to come.
I mean, I know that money is no object, because if he's pulling up in an S-Class, then he's doing all right for himself. You know what I mean? So do you know what? I'm gonna go with actually a rivalry that's so underrated that actually happened like during my time watching F1, and that is Sebastian Vettel versus Fernando Alonso. Because when I started watching the sport, like in 2012, 2013, like, these guys hated each other. Maybe not so much Seb, but Fernando. We know Fernando can get off the rails so easily about, so quickly about pretty much anyone. They absolutely hate each other. I know Fernando hated, seeing Seb win, and just all those years at Ferrari where they couldn't quite build him a car good enough, and he couldn't quite challenge in that. I mean, he said some pretty, like, I remember there was one interview he gave to Lee McKenzie where he was like, he's won obviously all these, 4 world titles, and when he gets a car like everyone else's, if he's finishing, 5th, 6th, or 7th, then those titles are going to be bad news to him. And I was just like, oh. So yeah, that's the level that hatred that was there. So, and I think it's also ironic, obviously, that Vettel ended up replacing obviously Fernando at Ferrari. They kind of swapped a little bit, and it didn't turn out that good for Fernando. It turned out very, very well for Seb. And then you go all the way to like Seb's final race, and you're seeing Fernando like dap him up in the car, and just the mutual respect that they have for each other last year in 2022, and you just go, it is unreal to think that these two guys, and especially Fernando, who hated Seb just 10 years ago, is like, they have this massive amount of respect. They know that they're from a similar generation. And I think more stories from like that rivalry from way back in the day is what I want to hear. I want to see, I don't know if I want to say that Fernando is the villain, but I want to see that villain arc, you know what I mean? So and also for F1 Twitter, when it comes to like Vettel content, Alonso content, it's all just money, isn't it? So they'll love it.
Absolutely, Aldas. And I agree with you, I mean, they're very interesting individuals. With Fernando Alonso, you mentioned kind of he's like the heel, if we're talking in wrestling terms, of like, guys which you don't want to get on the bad side of, the guy that can be a bit salty. That's why on this podcast, you nicknamed him the Saltfish Patty. But just generally, he's a fighter. He gives no inch. He gives no, like, even in Lewis's rookie season, I remember the guy like deliberately holding Lewis up because back then you had to refuel the cars in the actual pit stop boxes. So I remember both of the McLarens were going out to do a run at Hungary, and then Alonso was in front of Lewis, and he deliberately decided to just park his car there so Lewis couldn't get serviced and get back out in time to set another kind of like qualifying lap. So we know that Alonso has that crafty element, and he needed it, and that's why he's one of the great drivers, because he's the guy that was heralded as the one that dethroned Michael Schumacher, another legend of the sport, and a go of achievements and stuff like that. And then Vettel as well, he was like F1 shiny new toy, something like what Max has become today in terms of being the youngest driver at the time to win a race, the youngest driver to win like 4 championships on the row, and all the stuff that he did with Red Bull when Red Bull was still basically new. They had the likes of Mark Webber, Christian Albers, and all the other wash guys that are probably driving Ferrari Challenge right now. But like he really gave Red Bull its first success. So I think amazing. That'd be a really interesting to watch. And money I would definitely pay Aldous. So we need to get that CEO of Netflix over to you sooner than later. So before we let you go, Aldous, I'm gonna drop another bombshell on you. I'm gonna give you one more hypothetical question. So I don't know if you actually have a video of this kind of vein on the channel, but one day I'd love to see it maybe on there if it hasn't been a thing before. Again, who would you say is the most underrated driver in F1 history? And who would you say is the worst driver in F1 history? And I'm going to take Latifi out of this because he'd be the easiest one to go for in modern day history.
Oh my god, that was brilliant. In terms of the most underrated, I mean, obviously, again, I can only speak from my lifetime, and I put a big emphasis on drivers I actually watched. I actually could judge for myself. I'm not going to talk about drivers from the 90s or 80s that I did actually see for myself. So underrated, it's got to be Robert Kubica for me. Like this guy in the late 2000s and early 2010s, like that 2010 season he had at Renault. This guy was unreal in the junior categories. He was right up there with Lewis and Nico. Like he was racing karts and single seaters with them, and he was right up there with those guys. So that's the quality driver that he was, and just the way his career, in terms of for people that don't know, like this guy was on top of the world. Like he, won his first ever race in 2008 for BMW Sauber at the time. Then that team went rubbish. Then he moved to Renault, had an unbelievable season in 2010, got a few, quite a few podiums in a midfield car. Like he was on that level. And then he would have gone to Ferrari. There was apparently a Ferrari contract, so he would have been with Fernando Alonso at Ferrari for like 2012, 2013. And then, funny enough, he probably would have been there with Seb when Seb came in, so that would have been quite fun. But ultimately, he had a rally crash. He was doing some rallying in the off season and at the beginning of 2011. So imagine, where we are now, like 11 years ago, and he almost lost his arm because of it. And ultimately, his Formula One career kind of ended after that. Now he did make one of, he came back in 2019, but yeah, that was not the Robert Kubica that we knew. So yeah, biggest what if, man. He was the biggest what if in Formula One, and definitely an underrated driver for the people that maybe don't know too much about him, because I think that he would have definitely been challenging for world titles. There's no doubt about it in my mind. And when it comes to the worst driver, I mean, to be honest, it wouldn't have even been Latifi. Like, I'll take Latifi over Mazepin. I'm just going to throw Mazepin in there because I think there's drivers that I've seen that there's drivers that maybe I've seen that were worse than Mazepin, but that's only because they had worse cars. Like, if you're given a terrible car that's like even worse than the Haas of 2021, because there was a time back in like the early 2010s where we had a gang of cars at the back of like HRT, Lotus, and like Virgin and Manor. Like, they were even worse than the Haas, and it's so difficult to judge those drivers. So I'm not even going to go in on them, but when you look at Mazepin in terms of how far, keep in mind, by the way, that Mick Schumacher, he struggled against K-Mag in 2022, and Mick Schumacher dominated Mazepin in 2021. So I wouldn't even want to know, like, yeah, he's a driver that never should have been in Formula One. He didn't deserve to be in Formula One, and he's just ultimately, kind of, he was never, even good enough for Formula One. And at the very least, Latifi, like, at least Latifi had some races that were okay. Like Mazepin was just a disaster from start to finish, and even the way he left F1, like it wasn't a good situation because of what was happening, in the outside world, the entire conflict. But in a weird way, I'm just happy he was gone.
It was a relief for so many of us, Aldas. I agree with you. And big shout out to Robert Kubica, Polish legend, man. Honestly, like, again, I share your excitement as well over him and that huge crash. He was a guy that was like a crash test dummy, man. He'd be involved in so many accidents, like the one at Canada where like the car literally flipped and like dug into the grass and did like full 900-degree spin, and he still came back. And then unfortunately, like you mentioned as well, it was like a WRC preseason test, which would curtail the nice part of his career. So I absolutely agree with you.
By the way, actually, really quickly,
yeah,
really quick, that crash you're talking about in Canada in 2007, that was a gnarly crash. Like you can see in the footage, his legs are actually waving about in the cockpit, but he had to take the next race. Obviously, you can race next time out just on medical grounds. And the next race was the 2007 USA Grand Prix at Indianapolis. And BMW Sauber needed a driver to step in. And the driver that stepped in was Sebastian Vettel, making his first ever appearance in Formula One at the and because obviously Robert couldn't race the next time out. So yeah, it gave Seb a chance to make his F1 debut.
True. And it's amazing when we look at stuff like that as well, like how in those moments where something bad happens, something else positive can come out of it. And it was like the same thing as well with like literally Nick de Vries getting a shout now, in Formula One. And had it not been for Alex Albon and his appendicitis, it might have been a completely different story, So it's interesting how these moments in history, they can completely change the outlook of the sport, especially in terms of the success that Seb's had. And, before we wrap up this episode, because, we really appreciate Aldas and his time as well and the big event that we're going to promo again before we end this recording. Blag, who would you say is the most underrated driver in F1 history and the absolute worst driver in F1 history?
Yeah, I'll be quick. I mean, Aldas basically admitted that the most underrated driver in F1 history is Alexander Rossi, because, those teams in the early 2010s, they didn't give their drivers a chance. Look, Alex Rossi came in the Caterham, competitive, or was it a Manor? I can't even remember. I think it's Manor. In any case, he was trying to get some money together for that Caterham, but it didn't happen. So, that's for me. Like, clearly, Alex Rossi, Indy 500 winner, multiple race winner, gonna smoke Pato this season.
Right, don't start that. Don't start that, bro. Don't start
that. Worst driver in worst driver in F1 history. Honestly, like there's a fantastic YouTube channel by a guy called Peter Brook. I think it's called Brook F1. He literally just
shout out to Peter. He's really good.
Yeah, have you seen his video? He ranked all of the racing drivers in F1 from the 1990s. Incredible video. It's like 2 hours. I was just doing there, because I'm a cool guy. I was just listening. It's incredible. So like Taki Inui is up there, Lavaggi, some of the terrible drivers. Go and look at that video. I promise you, not to like pimp out one of your rivals, Aldas, of course, but a fantastic video that will tell you who the worst F1 driver is of history.
No. Honestly, I know Peter. I've spoken to him a little bit on Twitter. He's a really good guy. His content is absolutely A1, and he loves those. If you're into kind of podcasts, kind of long form content, yeah, he's absolutely on it. No, he's a really good guy. Definitely go and check him out. I love his videos.
Absolutely. Well, guys, on that note, we're going to wrap this episode up because we've got our Lithuanian goat in the building that needs to get prepared for the big BRKC event. So, Aldas, thank you again, for your time and just the amazing work that you do. And like I said earlier as well, we'll be rooting for you, and hopefully see you on the podium because like you deserve it, and it'd just be amazing as well to see you kick their asses and hopefully avenge me after my exploits last year at the event. But before you go, Aldas, just final words from you. Any projects or anything like that you can tell us about that your like loving fans and people can get excited about. And also as well, like there'll be a kid out there, there'll be one kid, start of the year, he'll be looking to start a YouTube channel, he'll be looking at the greats like you. And I know we talked about audio and tips like that, but what motivational advice could you give somebody to take their first steps into the world of F1 content creation?
Well, super quick in terms of a little preview of some exciting stuff. there is something very actually exciting in the works potentially. Next month, before the season kicks off, a live event with actual fans that I'm going to be doing. I don't want to say too much more than that, but that's going to be absolutely amazing. Actually, getting to do some content with fans in a live event. So yeah, little preview there that I can't wait. And in terms of actually advice, whatever your passion is just go for it. So whether don't be afraid of failure. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you feel you're passionate about something, you want to make videos about something, like even like something like Formula One, at least give it a go. And if it doesn't work out, then don't be kind of worried about that. That just happens. That's just life. So don't be afraid of failure. I think that'll be the number one thing.
Great advice there, Aldas. And like you mentioned as well, just everyone needs to stay positive, continue working hard, take that leap of faith. You never know where you could end up afterwards. And of course, big shout out to you as well, bro. You're an inspiration to all of us, and we all aspire to be as awesome as you are and to continue to create amazing content like you. And on top of that, I can't wait as well, man, for the fan event too. Hopefully we can head out there, me and Blag. Hopefully can catch up with you, and it'll be amazing if throughout the year we can touch up again and review things on the season, because in the world of Formula One there's always a story and there's always a place where it needs to be told, right?
For sure. No, I mean, thank you for inviting me on. It's really great to do these things with other F1 creators. There's nothing better than talking F1 with other content creators and other people and getting other people's opinions as well. And that's what it's all about. So yeah, just massive thank you to you as well. It's it was amazing.
Anytime, Aldas. And like I said, we'll be rooting for you. Guys, make sure you follow Aldas on all of his social media platforms, which will be out when this episode drops. This absolute banger. Until next time, it's been your boy AMG Dems, aka the MDM, the modern day Morgan Freeman. Although I think Aldas suits that role better. But anyway, blagging on, no pun intended. My awesome co-host F1 Blag in the building too. Blag, any final words?
And to say it's been an absolute honor, Aldas, and thanks for stopping by, and hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. And on that note, stripping the dipping sauce. Make sure you like, subscribe, circulate this video. Until next time, we're out. Peace.